is Mega Man. Many of you might remember it as the game where you run, jump, shoot, and get absolutely abused by these guys. For those of you who haven't played it, the game sees you traversing your way through 6 unique stages, each with their own boss to face at the end of them. Some of these bosses are completely free with the right weapon, whereas others keep you stun-locked for the whole fight. After completing each of the game's 6 stages, you are presented with a final challenge in the form of Dr. Wily, the evil scientist who reprogrammed the previous 6 bosses to fight you. Although a large portion of players never actually reached this point, since getting to the second room of Elecman stage was too much of a challenge to overcome. I guess there's a reason why the game got a slight reputation for its difficulty. Side tangent aside, the final section of Mega Man is broken up into 4 stages commonly known as the Wily stages, and just as before, each of these has a platforming-based level that must be navigated, with a boss fight awaiting the player once they have done so. And it is at the end of the first Wily stage that we come across our antagonist. Hiding among the 10-boss roster of this classic platforming running gun is a fiend plucked straight out of a modern bullet hell. Known as the Yellow Devil or Rock Monster in some cases, this unique boss cycles a swift and disorienting pattern of projectiles that must be dodged back and forth across the screen, and can only receive 1 hit per cycle, causing the fight against the Yellow Devil to be drawn out and tedious, with any break in the player's concentration lending itself to death after death. With many of the earlier bosses having such difficult strategies as defeating them before they can hit you, defeating them before they can hit you, and defeating them before they can hit you, it's no wonder that this guy would garner some notoriety, leaving many frustrated or resorting to pause glitch strategies to defeat the boss. Judging by the fact that you've made it this far into the video, I think it's fairly safe to assume that you have found yourself in this position before, and wonder how you might even go about beating the boss the intended way. Or perhaps you've managed to beat the Yellow Devil, but want to take the fight to the next level and beat it damageless. Either way, this video will serve as a comprehensive guide to the fight, discussing the general strategy and techniques I have found to be most effective in terms of conquering the Yellow Devil. Before I break down the strategy of the fight, it's important to know a few key aspects of Mega Man's gameplay. Having a basic understanding of these mechanics will make the Yellow Devil battle much easier than if you were to go into it without such knowledge. The first important mechanic to understand is the variable jump height of Mega Man. Depending on how long the A button is held, Mega Man can jump for several different heights and durations. While there are dozens of possible jump heights that can be achieved by holding an A pressed for specific frame counts, they can each be generalized into 4 approximate heights: low, medium high, and high. Low jumps are just a small hop and have very little airtime, allowing for a quick fall and high control over Mega Man. Medium-low jumps give a little extra height and airtime, which can be used to clear obstacles with more clearance than low jumps give, but at a slight cost to your mobility, as you have to wait until Mega Man has returned to the ground before you can jump again. Medium-high jumps are the next step up from medium-low jumps, and as such they provide some additional height and airtime, with the subsequent loss in mobility that the previous jump had as well. Finally, high jumps are the penultimate jump that Mega Man can perform, giving him the maximum height and airtime, but with a severely long recovery period, since waiting for Mega Man to return to the ground from a long jump takes nearly a full second. Long jumps mainly find their use in clearing large gaps or obstacles, evading certain enemies, reaching high areas, or skipping certain sections in speedruns. But due to their poor recovery, long jumps can be detrimental during the Yellow Devil fight, and thus should be avoided during such. I will go further into detail on which jumps are most effective to use to avoid the Yellow Devil's projectiles when I get to the strategy of the fight. But for now, there is one more mechanic that is important to understand before taking on the Devil, and that is weapon effectiveness. Mega Man has a system of weapon effectiveness in which certain weapons deal different amounts of damage to certain enemies and bosses, and is said to be inspired by rock, paper, scissors. The system follows a cyclical nature in which Gutsman's weapon is effective against Cutman, Cutman's against Elecman, Elecman's against Iceman, Ice against Fire, Fire against Bomb, Bomb against Guts, and all of them against you. Although the Yellow Devil doesn't exactly fit into this cycle, weapon effectiveness still applies to the boss, with certain weapons dealing more damage to it than others. For simple comparison and explanation, I've placed each of the 7 available weapons into 4 different tiers based on their effectiveness against the Yellow Devil. Starting off in the bottom tier, Does Nothing, these weapons do nothing against the Yellow Devil. First of all, there are no blocks or boulders in the Devil's boss room, and these grabbable objects are needed in order to use Gutsman's weapon, rendering it useless. And secondly, both Iceman and Bombman's weapons just don't damage the Yellow Devil, so no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to beat it with any of these weapons. Moving on up to the next tier, we have Mega Man's base weapon, the Mega Buster. While it is possible to take down the Devil with this weapon, it does very little damage to the boss, and coupled with the small hitbox of its projectile, which results in frequent misses, the Mega Buster is overall a poor choice of weapon for the fight, requiring at least 14 cycles to defeat the Yellow Devil, but often taking many more due to missed shots. Going into the Works Well tier, we have both Cutman and Fireman's weapons. These 2 weapons do the same amount of damage as the Mega Buster, and thus require a minimum of 14 cycles to take down the Devil, but both of them are much easier to hit the boss with, and thus miss less often. Fireman's weapon has the benefit of a high range, with the drawback that it can be difficult to hit the highest eye configuration of the Yellow Devil, which I'll explain in greater detail when I talk about the fight strategy. Cutman's weapon, on the other hand, has a nice arcing motion, which makes it quite easy to hit the Devil, no matter its eye placement. However, this comes with a caveat in the form of range, as if you distance yourself too far from the Yellow Devil's position, you will be unable to hit it. Finally, in the best tier is Alekman's weapon, as it outputs double the damage that any of the other weapons do to the Yellow Devil, effectively halving the number of cycles needed to defeat the boss from 14 down to 7. Additionally, Alekman's weapon has one of the largest hitboxes of all the weapons in the game, meaning that you will rarely find yourself missing the Devil while using it, although occasionally it might happen. Now with both the weapon effectiveness system and jump height mechanics covered, I can begin explaining the general strategy used to defeat the Yellow Devil. To understand how to go about beating the Yellow Devil, it is important to first know how the fight works. The Yellow Devil fight is broken up into 2 repeating phases, the pattern phase and the damage phase. The pattern phase consists of a long pattern sequence, in which the player must dodge projectiles made up of the Yellow Devil's shape memory alloy-based body. The projectiles fly in a set pattern that repeats back and forth across the screen from cycle to cycle. The damage phase, on the other hand, sees the Yellow Devil opening its eye in one of 4 configurations, and firing a single shot at the player. It is during this phase that you can damage the Yellow Devil, however only once per cycle. I'll mainly be focusing on the pattern phase here, as this is where the bulk of the fight takes place, and what really lends itself to the Yellow Devil's reputation. However, I will also touch on the damage phase as well, given there are some important aspects to such that should be pointed out. But before that, let's take a look at the pattern phase of the fight. A main issue that players tend to have with the Yellow Devil fight is that they find it to be so confusing and disorienting, when in reality it is much simpler than it appears to be. You see, the pattern phase of the fight has a pattern consisting of 19 total projectiles that, when the player tries to keep track of all of them, can be quite hard to read. However, doing so is almost completely unnecessary, as more than half of the projectiles in the pattern phase can be flat out ignored. In fact, only 7 of the 19 projectiles require any sort of reaction from the player. This is due to the pattern having 5 different possible projectile heights: very low, low, medium, high, and very high. Out of these 5 different heights, only projectiles in the very low and low height categories actually need to be dodged, as everything else will simply pass over Mega Man's head. Thus a very chaotic and intimidating fight gets reduced to a manageable 7 projectile pattern. Once this is understood, it's only a matter of memorizing the pattern of the important projectiles and learning the best way to dodge them before you will be able to take down this widely feared and gamer rage-inducing menace. The pattern to be memorized is as follows: low, very low, low, followed by a very low and low projectile in quick succession, another low, and finally a very low projectile to top it off. It is important during the pattern phase of the fight to keep your jumps low, as this will allow for you to retain a higher mobility and dodge faster, which becomes especially apparent with the 2 projectiles that have very little space between them. Optimally, you should try to dodge very low projectiles with either low or medium low jumps, and low projectiles with medium low or medium high jumps. High jumps should be avoided entirely during the pattern phase of the fight, and are really only useful during the damage phase, which I will elaborate on shortly. One last step to mastering the pattern phase of the Yellow Devil fight is optimizing your movement when dodging. What I mean by this is correctly timing your movement across the screen as to give yourself the most space to dodge the projectiles. This may sound complicated, but it's really quite simple. Essentially, you should move towards the projectiles when you jump to dodge them, and away from them whenever you fall past them. In this clip, you can see how this strategy works. When Mega Man jumps to dodge the Yellow Devil's projectile, he moves opposite the movement of the projectiles, allowing him to clear them sooner than if he were to merely jump without moving. And once he has passed over a projectile, he reverses his movement, falling in line with the projectile's path. By doing this, Mega Man increases the distance between himself and the next projectile, allowing for more time to react and dodge it correctly. Another benefit of moving this way during the pattern phase is that it gives you time to fall further before any of the projectiles in the medium or higher height categories can reach your position, and thus allows you to focus more on the very low and low projectiles. That essentially encompasses the general strategy that should be utilized for the pattern phase of the Yellow Devil fight. It may be difficult to perform at first, but with a little practice and enough focus on the fight, you will no doubt be able to overcome the challenge. Now with the pattern phase out of the way, I'll briefly touch on the damage phase of the fight, and what should be done during it as well. The damage phase is a short part of the fight that occurs immediately after each pattern phase, and in which the Yellow Devil opens its eye in one of 4 configurations and fires a single shot at the player. Once you have dodged the final projectile in the pattern phase, you should run away from the Yellow Devil's position and perform a high jump in order to dodge its attack. With its eye open, the Yellow Devil is vulnerable to damage by the player, and can receive 1 hit per damage phase, with the player having to hit the boss in its eye. This is where the different eye configurations of the Yellow Devil become important. These 4 possible configurations are low, centered, raised, and high. Both the centered and raised configurations of the Devil's Eye are relatively easy to hit, and don't require any precise timing. However, the high and low configurations can be somewhat difficult to hit without careful inputs. The high configuration in particular requires you to fire near or at the peak of your jump in order to land a hit on the boss, whereas the low configuration can either be successfully damaged by firing your weapon very early in your jump, or when you're nearing the ground on your way back down from the jump. Both of these ways are effective in hitting the Devil's Eye in the low configuration, and it is up to you to decide which one you prefer to do. And that is the general strategy and techniques used during the Yellow Devil fight to make it go as smoothly as possible. And while it does take some practice, once you've grown accustomed to it, the Yellow Devil fight will seem much easier than it is made out to be. Now I suppose I should show this strategy in action, as it's easy to say that a strategy is effective, but it's another thing to prove it. So here's a damageless Yellow Devil fight, performed by myself using this very strategy. If you made it here to the end of the video, I'd like to take the second to thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to give the video a like and share it with whoever you think might be interested. If you wish to be up to date with future content like this, perhaps consider subscribing. And if you have any other Mega Man problems you would like me to cover, leave a comment and I'll look into it. But once again, thanks for watching.